After a week off from the action, the June Joust qualifiers are ready to commence. This also means the return of everybody's favorite meme, my prediction series. There's so many fun storylines and teams to be paying attention to over these next few weeks, and you've got plenty of exciting matchups to look forward to as well. Not to mention that hero pools are being implemented for the entirety of the qualifiers plus the tournament itself. If you didn't see it, here is who we have banned for the next 4 weeks. Speaking of hero pools, that transitions me to my next point. Meta predictions. While I can't say for certain what heroes are going to be played, I see teams going a few different directions. One is double shield. Here's how I see it. With Reinhardt out of the mix, that means Rush is all but dead. No Zenyatta, Tracer, or Sombra means it's going to be a lot harder to go fast on dive comps, meaning that they might be less appealing. Along with them, you probably see a bit more sniper heroes in the mix and a fair amount of BAP Brig, maybe even Echo. I would not be surprised at all if the game gets slowed down greatly, but of course, teams could still choose to go dive or something else that's fast because Winston, D.Va, Wrecking Ball, and Zarya are still in the pool and some maps are going to favor them. You still have Ana as well for the nano boost, so dive could realistically work. It's just a question of what teams plan to do without Sombra or Tracer. Maybe you see a lot of Ashe Echo like the old days. Maybe some teams are daring enough to try Genji. There's a whole lot of potential there. Or maybe we see Roadhog get some time in the spotlight finally. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the return of like Hog Sigma or something along those lines. But overall, more slower paced comps with some dive still in the mix are what I expect to see. Characters like Orisa, Hog, and Sigma likely see more action, while Lucio, Mei, and McCree likely become less relevant. Those are my thoughts on what the meta could be though, so let's move into the game, shall we? As per usual, the action starts on Friday afternoon, and first up on the list is the Paris Eternal versus Toronto Defiant. While I won't go as far as to say it's a key match because it likely won't be close, I recommend paying attention to see how the Eternal's new main support does. If Dridro lives up to the hype, he should make for a nice upgrade over Neptuno. If that proves to be the case, perhaps he gives this team some needed life. Maybe they make the game at least kind of interesting. But at the same time, there's only so much a main support can do on his own to lift a team, which is why I once again will say that I do not believe this game will be extremely close. Honestly, this meta might end up being good for Toronto. It's not that they're bad at Rush, it's more that dive is a bit more refined for them. Not to mention that people such as Michelle and Hisu could probably have a field day in the bunker mirror match. The only thing that sucks is Nice not having access to the Tracer, but besides that, I'm kind of liking the Defiant here, so I believe they'll take this 3-1. I figure things could get a little sloppy at times since it's a new meta that has not been practiced a ton yet, so I'll give Paris a map. Why not? I think Khan and Dan could greatly benefit from a slower type of pace because Dan maybe feeds a little bit less in this kind of meta where he plays Orisa, which means Khan can focus a bit more on being a playmaker rather than a heal bot. But I highly doubt that's going to be enough since they do kind of lack the general firepower to match one of the better mid-tier teams. Moving on to the second Friday matchup, we continue with the EU Extravaganza as the London Spitfire take on the Florida Mayhem. Again, it's not exactly an ideal matchup on paper. Florida, they're coming off a solid tournament run, while London are still trying to get their first win of the season. It's a pretty uphill battle if you're London, because their chances kind of come down to what heroes get played. In a double shield situation, they likely do a little bit better than if they're in dive, since Florida won't get as much impact out of OG, and Yaki can't play the Tracer, which definitely does help. But even with all of that in mind, it's hard to see them winning. The Spitfire were so incredibly sloppy during the May Melee. They got a bit better every single game, but it was nothing mind-blowing. It's hard to go against a team who is really starting to get into a groove, you know? It feels to me like BQB is in for a pretty big day. If we see more Ashe like I believe we will, then nobody on the side of London is going to stop this man. I truly do believe the Spitfire will have no answer for him, which is why I am picking the Mayhem to win in a sweep. If London were to contain BQB, then maybe they could steal a map, but no matter what comp ends up getting played, you have to like the Mayhem in this series. Besides OG, Double Shield was Florida's bread and butter last year, and that's a clear advantage for them as a result. And if they go dive, that's even better because OG's impact is going to skyrocket. London kind of needs a weaker team to get that first elusive win of the season, but unfortunately, their strength of schedule is pretty brutal this month, so don't get your hopes up too high if you're a London fan. Alrighty, time for day one of APAC, where we begin with the Spark and Charge. I'm looking forward to this one. Both teams intrigue me. The Spark ended their qualifiers on such a positive note, and I'd love to see how they do now that they've built up their confidence a bit. On the other side of things, the Charge are playing their first game since they parted ways with two of their coaches, so I'm curious to see how they do under a new direction. Both teams need this one too, as they both sit at 1 and 3 currently in the standings. A win here could be very beneficial for either team. A 2-3 hole is not nearly as bad as 1-4. But who gets the win here? Well, on paper, you gotta like the Spark. They beat the Charge pretty badly just a few weeks ago, and you'd have to imagine Shy and the rest of his group were only going to get better and better. It doesn't really help that the Charge hitscan situation still feels kind of unclear as well, but I wouldn't completely write off the Charge. Like I said, a new head coach could work wonders. We saw it happen to the Spark, so maybe the Charge could have similar luck. There's a chance the meta could move in a great direction for the Charge too. If more double shield is the play, then the Charge tanks immediately get a lot more value. It's the comp that Rio and Krong kind of made a name for themselves on last year. That could make it much harder for the Spark tanks to gain a notable advantage, unlike the last meeting. But when I look at the two teams overall, the Spark are in the better position. They're still the more versatile team, and their stars have been playing a lot better as of late. So I have the Spark taking the series in 4 maps. Next up, we have what could end up being a real banger. It's a Shanghai versus Chengdu rematch. It's the two teams who represented the East in the May Melee. It goes without saying that this is going to be a key match, maybe even the game of the week. Two of the best teams Asia has to offer are going head-to-head, which will hopefully be a bit closer than last time. If I had to guess, it probably will be closer. Chengdu are confident, but Shanghai have shown great improvement since their previous meeting. If the pace gets slowed down, I immediately favor Shanghai. If we still see a lot of dive and wrecking ball, it's anybody's game. But I personally am leaning towards the Dragons, mostly because I think they're going to be dominant this stage. After coming up short against the Fuel, this group is going to be more motivated than ever to step up their game. Did you see the look on Void's face when they lost? That's the type of face you see when a superstar is about to take it to the next level. The revenge tour is going to start now, but there's another reason I'm liking Shanghai besides that factor. With the exception of what we saw against the Fuel, this team rarely loses to the same opponent twice. The Dragons are going to learn from their mistakes in the last meeting and come away with a W in a 3-2 victory. I see the Dragons winning for sure, but I doubt Chengdu makes it easy on them. They're a hard team to get a read on, and their DPS can confidently match just about anybody when Leave is getting into a rhythm. Plus, the new meta could mean some sloppiness out of both sides if we see major changes. But in the end, the Dragons do take it. The third and final game taking place in Asia on Saturday is the Fusion versus NYXL. I'll be honest, I'm a little worried about New York. In my opinion, the last thing they needed was a meta change, or at least a potential meta change. They were struggling to find wins when the meta was stagnant, so what's going to happen now if everything ends up changing? I'm hoping a change of pace will do them some good, because maybe they could build up their confidence with a fresh start, but this might not be the first opponent you want to run into if you're looking to get into a rhythm. We're talking about a top 2 or 3 team, depending on who you're talking to, in the region, who are angry at themselves for not making the previous tournament. They need a team to take their frustration out on, which is not a good sign for the young, invulnerable NYXL team. With the way the Philly supports and DPS have been playing, I have no choice but to give this to the Fusion in a 3-0 effort. The one redeeming quality of this game are the storylines, though. You have the classic Jonek versus Alarm matchup, but also Hoppa and Mono trying to prove to their old team that they're on to bigger and better things. Besides that, though, there likely won't be all that much to look forward to. Heading into Saturday afternoon, we've got the Paris Eternal versus the Washington Justice. Not exactly the most ideal way to start the Saturday NA games, but hey, not every matchup can be a banger on the schedule. If we get through the tough ones now, that just means more interesting ones later down the line. To give a quick overview, it's another brutal uphill battle for Paris. If anything, this might end up being a game they take even less seriously than their Toronto matchup because the Justice are a scarier team that will be more difficult to defeat. But of course, just to play devil's advocate, Paris kind of needs all the wins they can get currently because they seriously cannot afford to have another 1-3 or worse qualifier if they wish to have any sort of chance of fighting for a playoff spot. But the thing is, I don't think it really matters what they do. At the end of the day, they're a few tiers below this Justice team in terms of skill level. They get brutally outclassed on the front lines. Whether it's double bubble, dive, or double shield, Mag and Fury, they're going to assert their dominance, you'd have to imagine. And of course, that only gives Decay and the rest of the DPS more room to do their thing, which really sucks if you're Paris. I gotta give it to Washington in 3 here. I'm expecting the Justice to go hard this weekend, and I say that for 2 reasons. 1, they're probably unhappy with their shortcomings in the knockout round, so they feel like they have something to prove. But 2, they need to play flawlessly in this first week because they have the Mayhem and Shock in week 8. Those are 2 games they could legitimately lose, and if that's the case, they gotta get 2 wins and a good map differential early on to maximize their chances of making the knockouts. 2-2 was just barely good enough to get the bottom seed in the knockouts of NA in the last round of qualifiers, and it's a scary thing when you can't control your own destiny, so the Justice will show no mercy. Paris are catching them at a really bad time, hence why I believe they will definitely get blown out. As we move on, the Reign and Outlaws game is a bit more interesting. Both of these teams will be attempting to answer the same roaring question. How can you play when rush comps are no longer accessible to you? The Outlaws showed they can play fairly well on things like Double Bubble and such, but I want to know how they're going to fare when they have to play this kind of stuff consistently for whole sets instead of on specific maps or in certain scenarios. For me personally, it is the deciding factor on whether or not they are true threats in the NA region. On the other side of it, the Reign have not been promising at all off of Rush, and I'm curious to see if they've made any improvements in the time they've had to practice. If Double Shield becomes more of the norm, then maybe this series could be interesting, because last year, Orisa comps proved to be a real strong point for Atlanta. They might stand a chance in the bunker setup, they might be really fun to watch, but at this moment in time, I kinda just trust the Outlaws more. It feels weird saying that given their history, but they feel different this year. It's not the same team. Their coaching is stronger, and their players don't feel so one-dimensional, and that's a big problem if you're the Reign. Maybe you get good performances out of your DPS, or like one of your tanks does well depending on the comp. But generally speaking, there could be some issues. One of my biggest concerns is Masa. He's at his best when he gets to play the Lucio. He's not really the same player on Brig. Juby is also best on Lucio, but from what I've seen, he is a bit better on the Brigitte. It really might depend on what we see, but I'm going with Houston. I find their overall team play as well as their coaching more trustworthy. It's not to say that the Reign can't match them, because when you have Kai and Pelican, anything is possible, but the Outlaws are currently the safer bet. It's pretty difficult to invest in a team who constantly falls short to the top teams, you know? The Reign simply aren't proven enough yet, which is why I ultimately believe the Outlaws will be the ones to win. Ending your Saturday action is Boston versus Toronto. This is the type of matchup that really gets me curious about Boston. So far, they've shown not so great results against the good teams and mediocre results against the below average teams. So what happens when they face somebody you consider to be average or slightly above average? As somebody who has put a lot of stock into Boston this year, I'm hoping they make this a game. In my opinion, Tracer being unavailable works to their advantage. I'm also a fan of Stan 1's Orisa, so if Bunker proves to be relevant, then maybe Boston has a chance. But those of you who know me well probably understand where I'm going with this one. Around here, I rarely trust unproven teams to beat somebody you'd consider to be superior to them. Once in a great while, I'll take the risk, but this doesn't really seem worth it based off of what Boston has shown me so far. Teams have to show me they're capable before I'm ready to trust them enough to get a quality win in what you'd consider to maybe be an upset. I'm going 3-2 Toronto as they continue their good start to the year. It's not to say that Boston can't push them though, because there definitely is a possibility we get a competitive series. After all, neither team has pulled off any crazy feats so far, but in crunch time, with a chance to either win or extend the series, I don't believe in the Uprising to get it done just yet. The Defiant have been more impressive when it comes to being clutch and outputting confidence during team fights, so I favor them in this particular matchup. With that out of the way, we're on to Sunday. First is a rematch between the Dragons and Spark. I'm sure this game is going to have some eyes drawn to it after what happened back in Week 3, and rightfully so. Shy and the Spark gave Shanghai a run for their money, and I'm sure they're feeling motivated to finish the job this time. Plus, you'd have to imagine the Dragons are taking more time to prepare for the Hunters, so it might be a decent game. If Shy can pull off more of his magic, then who knows what's possible. But the Dragons are still favored in my opinion. As I mentioned previously with the Chengdu game, I feel like the Shanghai players have something to prove. Their shortcomings have made them motivated to reclaim first place. I have very high expectations for this group this stage, and I cannot say the same for the Spark. I predict that the Dragons win the series 3-1. The Spark potentially could be on the rise, but this might be a little much. The meta could be in a new place, and I expect the Dragons to play far cleaner than last time. Now for the NYXL versus Charge matchup. I low-key think this could be good depending on the meta. If we get slower paced playstyles with shields, then the Charge have a shot. I know they haven't been playing well as of late, but that's where Ryu and Krung thrive. I'm not sure if I can say the same for the NYXL though. I could be wrong, but the stuff we saw them play during the May Melee seemed more up their alley. If I'm being honest, they seemed the most comfortable on Rush, which is obviously not available now, and now that Zen is not an option for Jonak, that's going to really suck. If there was ever a time for the Charge to pull off a win against the NYXL, now would be it. It really depends on what they show us though. Besides getting a more favorable meta, they have some obvious issues to work around. First, they have to play better under this new head coach and just show better overall adjustments during their game planning. We also need to see some serious adjustments at DPS. Now that Tracer is out, do they still want to run Choice A1 full time? Or do they trust more in Eileen to continue playing Hitskin over Kaylee? There's so many unanswered questions, which honestly concerns me. If I knew for sure what the meta was, as well as the Charge's plans, I might be tempted to go with them, but my lack of clear-cut answers has me thinking the NYXL win. I'm gonna say 3-2 New York in case the Charge do something crazy, but this could realistically be a blowout too. New York might not be in a great position themselves, but at least they have the basics down, you know? They have a lineup they can comfortably field. For them, it's kind of just a matter of putting those last few pieces together to put up a better fight against good competition. To me, the Charge kind of feel a few steps behind them in that regard, so the NYXL feel like the right choice to make. Wrapping up the games on the eastern side of the globe, the Chengdu Hunters and Philly Fusion have their rematch. Given the epic game they played last time and their general placing in the standings, I gotta highlight this one as a key match. It's a pretty big week for Chengdu, huh? Shanghai and Philly back-to-back is pretty brutal. It's pretty good training though. They had to play good teams back-to-back in the recent tournament they were part of, but they weren't ready for prime time. Here's their opportunity to show some growth, and realistically speaking, they could absolutely pull off 2 wins this week. This team has proven they are more than talented enough to keep up. But this game might be tougher than the Shanghai game because of the sheer fact that Philly beat them last time. They had Shanghai figured out back in week 1, so they have confidence against that group. But they had no such luck against the Fusion. They could not get them to crack. And if I'm being honest, these hero pools might not do too much to affect what Philly played successfully against them last time. The exception to this comes through Tracer, of course, but that's really it. Sure, there's no Rhine and Rush comps, but Havana is not even in this month's map pool anyway. I guess that's one bright side. They don't have to worry about getting rolled on Havana, so their odds of winning Escort are going to skyrocket at least a little bit. But a lot of the same issues still present themselves. What is their plan to counter Alarm? He ate them alive last time. Why should I expect this time to be any different? And even if they do manage to slow him down, can Monk realistically outplay him? I would say the odds are kind of small. I still can't help but feel like the support battle is a mean mismatch, and it seems to me that Philly have a good grasp of how the Hunters play effectively. So for those reasons, I'm going with the Fusion in a 3-2 win. Something tells me the Hunters will find some sort of comp they can abuse to at least make it kind of interesting. Maybe it's like double sniper or something. That might be an issue for Rascal since he's not extremely well known for his sniping abilities. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if he showcases a great performance anyway since he is a flex god. I have confidence in Philly to get this done. Their other matchup this week requires far less preparation than what Chengdu has to deal with, so they're already off to a great advantage strategically. They hold all the cards. Unless Philly chokes, they should win this one. Heading back into North America one final time, we start with the Atlanta Reign versus the London Spitfire. I may be a little bit worried about the Reign getting exposed in a meta where they can't utilize Reinhardt at all, but they are going to be able to handle London, I feel. Their sheer star power alone gives them the edge in my opinion. London may have that British Hurricane core going for them with synergy and everything, but synergy only gets you so far when there's a gap between you and your opponent skill-wise. Who on the London Spitfire is going to be slowing down Kai and Pelican? The London DPS have been struggling, and they're playing an elite duo who have been keeping up with even the San Francisco Shock DPS. The situation does not seem promising. The tanks on the side of London are really going to have to pester Kai and the Atlanta DPS, or they're going to absolutely eat Shaxx, Hybrid, and Blase alive, especially in a kind of meta where Shaxx can't even utilize Tracer. I would be very surprised if the Atlanta DPS don't have a field day. It is this major factor which makes me believe the Reign take it 3-1. Because Atlanta have been inconsistent and the meta could cause some strange play on both sides, I'll give London a map for the heck of it, but that's all I'll give them. Next on the agenda is Boston versus Washington. Kind of like with the Spark and Dragons, there's a certain interest factor that presents itself with this rematch. The Justice said they didn't prepare for Boston all that much in their previous meeting, which was a little too close for comfort. Here's our chance to see if they really weren't taking them seriously, or if the Uprising are simply improving. I'm hoping that Boston come out and play with confidence against a squad they know they're capable of taking maps from. Reasonably speaking, it is a possibility, but in my opinion, it's not likely. The meta will be in a different place this time. No Reinhardt means they can't abuse the Doomfist comms, and if you ask me, that's a problem. Washington's biggest struggle stemmed from rush comps last qualifier. Moving away from it is only going to benefit them. It'll mean an easier time for Mag and Assassin, who seem to struggle on that Mei at times, but at the same time, Tracer and Sombra were two of their bread and butter DPS picks, so maybe Boston can make the DPS battle interesting, I hope at least? But I have my doubts there because the Justice have far more options. Decay is good at most hitscan heroes he plays, then they could also sub in Jerry, and they could still utilize the Echo as well. I stand by the belief that Washington possesses more versatility in the DPS regard, and of course, I absolutely favor their tanks on just about everything you can imagine. I gotta give it to the Justice in a sweep here. Yes, I know Boston made it interesting last time, but like I said earlier, the Justice need to go off this week. In my opinion, they desperately need 2 3-0 victories given their brutal strength of schedule where nothing is guaranteed. There will be no messing around on their part, and Boston are arguably a stronger opponent than Paris, so if anything, they might give them even more attention and respect than last time. And of course, if they could beat them in 4 maps without giving them a ton of respect, I'm going to assume they could beat them pretty good if they seriously prepare for them. And lastly, we close out the weekend with the Outlaws and Mayhem, which will claim my third and final key match of the week. I'm pretty hyped to see what happens here. The Mayhem took crazy steps in the right direction, and they went further than Houston did results-wise. Had Houston made the Final Four, I'm not entirely sure if they go as far as Florida did, nor can I say for certain that they push Shanghai or Chengdu that much. Both sides feel to me, though, like they're in a pretty good spot with some crazy good feats that they've pulled off, so we could end up bearing witness to a pretty even match. I think the winner might come down to what ends up being played the most. If it's like Dive or Double Bubble, let's say, I favor the Mayhem. If it's Double Shield, I'm liking Houston slightly more. It's so hard to tell what is going to happen, but a big thing for me is that I fear for Houston a little bit more, just because they are at their best when they play Rhine. So in my opinion, Florida has the slight advantage, at least with their tank line and their level of comfort. More than anything though, this really might come down to who gets more value out of their flex DPS. With no Tracer on the table, that means both Yaki and Dante will always be off their most impactful hero. In other words, the man with the better flexibility could prove to be the true difference maker in this series, but honestly, it might also depend on the main support matchup a bit. It's not as impactful or as interesting as Yaki versus Dante, but Slime and Juby never getting to touch Lucio, or at least not touching him as much, kind of changes their overall dynamic. With their best hero kind of off the board in a sense, who's going to make the better decisions on Brigitte, Mercy, or whatever else they might end up playing? In that regard, you honestly might favor the Outlaws just because they do have a second option in Jake on standby. It really depends on who you put more of your stocks into. For me personally, it's the Mayhem at this point in time. They played at a very high level during the tournament, and I value that greatly. Plus, I believe in them to keep this up. It's a coin toss at the end of the day, but to me, Florida get the win 3-2. The thing that does it for me is valuing Yaki's flexibility a tiny bit more than that of Dante's. 2 of Dante's 3 strongest characters are not available. He still could play just fine, but I'm expecting Yaki to make a few more big plays down the stretch, which will ultimately be the difference maker in this series. Plus, like I said, I have worries about Houston defeating teams outside of a rush meta, at least the top teams, so I'm going against them today. And with that being said, that basically concludes my predictions for the week. It should be pretty fun to see how hero pools potentially change the landscape. Let me know what you think of that, plus this week's matches down in the comment section. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. But that's gonna do it. If you enjoy the content, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this one in the future. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your support. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.